So hey anime fans. The series name is What If Naruto Got Harem with Kung Fu Panda. So let's start the series. The World Tour. Not with sound, but with silence, a vacuum that swallowed everything Naruto knew. One moment, the aftermath of battle, the metallic taste of chakra and rain. The next, a stillness so profound it echoed. He fell through colors that had no name, through memories that weren't his, and landed not with impact, but with surrender. The air smelled of peach blossoms and damp stone. Naruto opened his eyes to a sky so blue it felt like a memory of peace. He lay on his back in a field of wildflowers, his orange jacket stark against the violet and gold petals. His body ached with a familiar, bone-deep weariness, but it was the quiet that disoriented him. No birdsong, no distant murmur of a village, no thrum of chakra networks. Just balance. A stillness that felt intentional, as if the world itself was holding its breath. Kurama? A low rumble echoed in his mind, more vibration than words. I am here. But this place, it's empty. And yet full. There is an energy here, but it is not chakra. It is order. Naruto sat up slowly, his movements deliberate, economical. He was on a mountainside overlooking a valley cradled by towering peaks. At its heart lay a serene collection of pagodas, bridges, and homes, a picture of tranquility. The palace of the Jade Palace stood sentinel atop a towering stairway. It was beautiful, but to Naruto's eyes, trained by war and hidden villages, it looked undefended. Open. Naive. He didn't stand out immediately. He simply existed, a splash of orange in a landscape of pastel watercolors. It wasn't until he reached the outskirts of the Valley of Peace, his steps silent on the cobblestone path, that he was seen. A rabbit vendor dropped a basket of radishes. The staring wasn't hostile. It was pure, unadulterated confusion. They saw a creature unlike any they knew, blonde fur like sunlight, strange blue eyes that held a sky's worth of depth, and an expression that was neither animal nor fully human. It was the stillness in him that unnerved them. He didn't gawk or panic. He observed, his gaze sweeping over roofs, alleys, potential vantage points, escape routes. He was mapping, not marveling. Whispers followed him like rustling leaves. Is he from the west? Look at his eyes, they're so sad. Is he a spirit? Naruto ignored them. His focus was on the energy Kurama had sensed. It was strongest coming from the palace above. A concentration of that ordered stillness. A locus of this world's balance. He began the climb, his body moving with the effortless grace of a shinobi, each step precise, carrying the weight of 100 battles in the slight slump of his shoulders. He was halfway up the 10,000 steps when he met her. She descended like a silent storm, a master of her own gravity. Striped fur, amber eyes sharp as kunai, a posture that spoke of a lifetime of rigid discipline. Tigress. She halted 3 steps above him, putting their eyes on a level. Her gaze was an assessment, scanning for threat, for intention, for weakness. You are not from the valley, she stated. Her voice was low, firm. Not a question. No, Naruto replied. His own voice was quieter than she expected, rough-edged but calm. Your purpose? I don't have one. I'm lost. The word hung between them. Lost. It didn't imply helplessness. It was a simple, stark fact. He was adrift, and this was where the currents had deposited him. Tigress's nostrils flared slightly. She smelled no deceit, only a profound exhaustion and something else, the faint, cold scent of ozone and blood, deeply buried. The Jade Palace is not for tourists. Turn back. Naruto's eyes drifted past her, up the endless stairs. Something up there is, keeping everything in place. I can feel it. I just need to understand where I am. His disregard for her command was not insolent, it was distracted. As if her authority was a secondary concern to the fundamental mystery of his existence. This irked her, but it also intrigued her. No one was this calm before her. Understanding is earned, she said, shifting her stance minutely. A warning. Naruto finally looked directly at her. In that blue gaze, Tigress did not see challenge. She saw recognition. He saw her discipline, her control, and the fierce loneliness that mantled it. He'd seen it in others, in himself, long ago. I've earned enough understanding for 10 lifetimes, he said softly. I'm not looking for a fight. Just a place to breathe. Before she could answer, a cheerful, grating voice echoed from above. Tigress! Who's your new friend? Invite him up! I just made noodle soup. Well, I spilled noodle soup, but there's still some in the bowl. But the panda stood at the top of the stairs, waving enthusiastically, a splash of black and white against the jade green. His smile was genuine, wide, but as his eyes met Naruto's, the smile flickered for a microsecond. It wasn't fear. It was a sudden, inexplicable feeling of redundancy. The dragon warrior felt the universe's balance hiccup. Master Shifu felt the disturbance in his meditation chamber. It was not the crash of imbalance, but a subtle tear, as if the tapestry of fate had been gently pulled at the edges. He opened his eyes, his old heart thumping a slow, wary rhythm. In the courtyard, he observed the stranger. The orange-clad creature. He stood with a neutral stance, but Shifu, with a lifetime of perception, saw the truth. It was not a stance of peace, but of containment. Every line of his body spoke of power held in brutal check, of storms caged behind calm eyes. Po was talking animatedly, trying to fill the silence. The Furious Five had assembled, a semicircle of wary curiosity. Viper studied the stranger's eyes. Crane noted the strange, worn bandage on his right arm. Monkey tried to crack a joke and was met with a polite, empty smile that never reached those ocean eyes. Mantis, perched on Monkey's shoulder, leaned forward, his antennae twitching. His heart, it beats so slowly. Like he's resting between battles. Shifu approached, his staff tapping a deliberate rhythm. You bring the wind of another world with you, Shifu said, stopping before Naruto. It disrupts the stillness. Naruto bowed, a shallow, respectful dip of his head. I apologize, master. I have no control over my presence here. What are you called? Naruto Uzumaki. And what is a Naruto Uzumaki in this world? A warrior? A spirit? A mistake? The question was harsh, designed to provoke a reaction. Naruto only nodded, accepting the barb. Maybe all three. This valley operates on destiny. On the will of the universe. The dragon warrior has been chosen. Shifu gestured to Pa, who shifted uncomfortably. There is no room for unchosen variables. Your existence here is a question the universe did not ask. The air grew tense. The five tightened their circle, not as a threat, but as a unit. Naruto looked from Shifu's stern face to Po's conflicted one, to the wary yet curious expressions of the five. He felt the weight of their destiny, their chosen roles. He was an error in their script. I don't believe in destiny, Naruto said, his voice barely above a whisper, yet it carried through the courtyard. I believe in people. In choice. In protecting what's in front of you. He looked at Pa, his gaze direct and without malice. I'm not here to be chosen. I'm just here. He turned and walked towards the palace gates, not seeking entry, but moving to the edge of the courtyard where a gnarled peach tree grew. He sat beneath it, his back against the trunk, and looked out over the valley he had climbed from. A silent declaration, I will not force my way in, but I will not flee. Shifu watched him, deeply unsettled. The panda, the dragon, the tiger, the mantis, they were all pieces on Uguay's board. This, Naruto, was a piece from another game entirely, dropped onto the cloth. His very presence changed the rules. Pa approached Shifu, his voice uncharacteristically small. Master, he feels really heavy. He carries worlds on his back, Pa. Shifu murmured, his eyes never leaving the figure under the tree. Worlds that were not meant to touch ours. I do not know if he will bring balance, or bury us beneath the weight of whatever he has lost. As the sun began to set, painting the valley in hues of fire and gold, Naruto sat unmoving. Inside, Kurama's voice was a gravelly whisper. They fear what they cannot categorize. Their balance is fragile, Kit. It is a beautiful dream. And we are the memory of a nightmare. Maybe, Naruto thought back, watching the first stars appear in the lavender sky. But even nightmares end. And sometimes, you wake up somewhere quiet. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen, to the strange, rhythmless heartbeat of a world that believed in chosen ones, while an unchosen one rested, for a moment, beneath its sacred tree. The story had not asked for him. But he was here. And his mere presence was already a question, waiting to be answered. Would you complete Chapter 1 from start? Chapter 1, The Uninvited Wind. The World Tour. Not with sound, but with silence, a vacuum that swallowed everything Naruto knew. One moment, he stood atop the Hokage monument, the wind of Konoha tugging at his cloak. The air was thick with the aftermath of victory, and the lingering scent of ozone and blood. He'd been looking out over the village he'd saved, rebuilt, and loved, feeling the weary weight of peace in his bones. The next moment, the horizon rippled like disturbed water. There was no enemy, no technique, no warning. Reality itself simply folded. He didn't fall. He unbecame. Colors bled into a formless gray. The comforting thrum of countless chakra signatures, from the bustling market below to the distant forests, snapped off like cut strings. The silence was absolute, deeper than any sensory deprivation. It was the silence of being unmade from a world that knew your name. Kit! Kurama's roar was a distant thunder in the dissolving vault of his mind. This is not a genjutsu. This is... The voice severed. Naruto Uzumaki, 7th Hokage, savior of the shinobi world, ceased to exist in the place that had forged him. He awoke to the scent of peach blossoms and damp stone. Consciousness returned not with a jolt, but with a slow, painful seep, like water into cracked earth. His first sensation was the cool, velvety touch of petals against his cheek. Then, the ache, a full body throb that spoke of profound cellular disruption, as if every particle of him had been disassembled and hastily reassembled. He opened his eyes. A sky of impossible blue greeted him, cloudless and serene. He lay on his back in a field of wildflowers that stretched to the base of majestic, green-clad mountains. The air was clean, almost sweet, carrying none of the familiar sense of industry, humanity, or latent chakra. It was empty, and yet profoundly full of a quiet, humming stillness. Kurama? He thought, the habit ingrained. A low, groggy rumble responded from the deep well within him. Here. Barely. That, transit, it was not of this reality. Or any I understand. The Nine-Tails' voice was uncharacteristically subdued, laced with a primal wariness. This place, do you feel it? There is a pressure. An order. It is not malevolent. It is architectural. As if the very laws of existence here are woven more tightly. Naruto sat up slowly, his muscles protesting. He was still in his Hokage attire, the white haori over his usual orange and black. The fabrics were intact, but felt oddly heavy, as if the air itself had a different density. He took a slow, deliberate inventory. No major injuries. His chakra pathways felt scrambled, fuzzy, like a radio picking up static, but the core of his power, his own vast reserves and Kurama's swirling, familiar presence, remained. It was just muffled, dampened by this new, silent world. He stood, his boots crushing delicate blossoms. The valley below was a masterpiece of tranquil beauty. A winding river glittered like a silver thread through lush, terrace fields and clusters of elegant, pagoda-style buildings. At the valley's head, a towering staircase carved into the mountain led to a majestic palace complex that seemed to glow with a soft, jade-like light. It was peaceful. It was perfect. It felt utterly alien. Konoha's peace was a vibrant, noisy, hard-won thing, built on the scars of conflict. This peace felt mandated. Innate. It sat upon the land like a commandment, and it made the shinobi in him deeply uneasy. A place with no visible defenses was either impossibly safe or dangerously naive. We are not where we belong, Kurama stated, the obvious hanging between them. No, Naruto whispered, his voice rough in the profound quiet. We're not. He began to walk downhill, his steps automatically shifting into the silent, energy-conserving gait of a shinobi on an infiltration mission. His eyes, however, weren't scanning for threats in the trees or hidden seals. They were cataloging the fundamental wrongness. The colors were too vibrant, the angles of the architecture too soft. There were no power lines, no discarded tools, no signs of the mundane struggle of life. It was like walking into a painting. His arrival at the outskirts of the Valley of Peace was met not with alarm, but with a bewildered stillness. A market street bustled with activity, rabbits, pigs, goats, ducks, and other anthropomorphic animals bartering for vegetables, pottery, and silks. The scene was lively, cheerful. Then, one by one, they noticed him. Conversations died mid-sentence. A goose dropped a porcelain vase. A pig vendor's jaw went slack. Naruto kept walking, his expression neutral, his pace unchanged. The stares were not hostile, but deeply confused. He was an anomaly their world logic could not process. His blonde hair, his human-like features amidst their animal forms, the strange fabric of his clothes, and most of all, the quiet, heavy presence he carried, it all marked him as other. A new kind of monkey? A young rabbit whispered to her mother. Look at his eyes, they've seen things, murmured an old goat, his own eyes wise and wary. Is he a wandering spirit? A lost ancestor? Naruto heard them all. His senses, though dulled for chakra, were still preternaturally sharp. He didn't react. He was a Hokage in a foreign land, and his first duty was assessment, not engagement. He saw no weapons, no defensive structures, no patrols. Their fear was the fear of the unknown, not of a tangible enemy. It was unsettling. His path, almost magnetically, led him to the foot of the colossal staircase. The energy Kurama sensed, that architectural pressure of order, pulsed more strongly from above. It was a beacon in the silent world. Without hesitation, he began to climb. The stairs were hewn from the mountain itself, worn smooth by countless feet. He climbed not with Poe's wheezing struggle, but with the relentless, untiring pace of a man who had walked through worse. Each step was measured, placing no unnecessary strain, conserving everything. His mind, however, was racing. A dimensional displacement. A natural phenomenon? An enemy attack? A consequence of some unstable leftover chakra from the last war? Every theory felt hollow. He was halfway up the 10,000 steps when the first sign of organized defense appeared. She descended toward him like a controlled avalanche. One moment the stairs above were empty. The next, she was there, a master of kinetic potential. A giant tiger, her fur a striking pattern of black and gold, her amber eyes sharp enough to cut glass. She moved with a lethal, liquid grace that spoke of a lifetime of brutal discipline. She halted 3 steps above him, placing their eyes on a level. Her gaze was a physical force, scouring him for threat, intention, weakness. Naruto stopped. He didn't tense, didn't shift into a defensive stance. He simply stopped. He met her gaze, his own blue eyes offering no challenge, only a deep, weathered calm. "You are not from the valley," she stated. Her voice was low, firm, leaving no room for contradiction. It was the voice of command. "No," Naruto replied. His own voice was quieter, a gravelly baritone worn smooth by time and command. It held no fear, no apology. "Your purpose?" "I don't have one." He saw her eyes narrow minutely. He amended, with stark honesty. "I'm lost." The word hung between them. Lost. It wasn't a plea. It was a report. A factual assessment of his metaphysical state. He was adrift, and this staircase was the nearest solid ground. Tigress's nostrils flared slightly. She smelled no deceit, only the foreign, clean scent of his clothes, the faint, cold ozone of expended energy, and beneath it all, the iron-rich, deeply buried scent of old blood, so much blood it had become part of him. "The Jade Palace is not for tourists. Turn back." Naruto's gaze drifted past her, up the endless stairs toward the source of the pulsing order. "Something up there is keeping everything in place. I can feel it. I just need to understand where I am." His disregard for her command was not insolent, it was detached. Her authority was a local ordinance, and he was dealing with a crisis of cosmology. This intrigued her as much as it irritated her. No one was this calm before her. Not the villagers, not the 5, not even upon his best day. This calm was different. It wasn't the absence of fear, it was the presence of something else that had long since eclipsed fear. "Understanding is earned," she said, her stance shifting almost imperceptibly. Her weight settled, her paws aligning. It was a warning writ in the language of the body. Naruto's eyes finally snapped back to hers. In that deep blue, Tigress did not see a challenge to her skill. She saw a recognition of her type. He saw her discipline, her absolute control, and the immense, lonely burden that such control invariably carried. He'd seen it in the mirror, in Kakashi, in Sasuke. He knew its shape. "I've earned enough understanding for 10 lifetimes," he said, his voice softening almost imperceptibly. "I'm not looking for a fight. Just a place to breathe." Before she could process this, to decide whether it was profound or pretentious, a cheerful, booming voice shattered the tension from above. "Tigress! Who's your new friend? Invite him up! I just finished morning training. Well, I attempted morning training. There may have been a landslide, but the view is great now." The Panda stood at the top of the staircase, waving one thick arm enthusiastically. He was a vibrant splash of black and white against the serene jade and stone. His smile was wide, genuine, an open book of good intentions. But as his eyes, from that distance, met Naruto's, the smile faltered for a heartbeat. It wasn't fear of a threat. It was a sudden, visceral, and inexplicable feeling of duplication. As if the universe, in a moment of confusion, had drafted 2 entirely different answers to the same question. The dragon warrior, the ultimate embodiment of this world's chosen destiny, felt the fabric of his own tidal ripple. Master Shifu felt the disturbance not in the air, but in the flow of chi. He sat in the center of the palace courtyard, deep in a meditative trance, seeking harmony with the universe's grand design. The design, for a moment, developed a snag. It was not the violent tear of chaos, like Tai Lung's rage or Kai's conquest. It was a subtle, dissonant insertion. A note from a different scale played in the middle of a sacred symphony. His eyes snapped open, ancient and sharp. He found the source immediately. The stranger stood in the courtyard, a statue of orange and white amidst the flowing movements of the Furious Five's practice. Shifu observed from the shadow of the Hall of Heroes. The stranger's stance was neutral, relaxed to the untrained eye. To Shifu, it screamed of hyper-efficient containment. Every muscle, every breath, was calculated to hold back an ocean of power. It was the stance of a dam, not a pond. But was talking, a rapid-fire stream of welcoming chatter trying to fill the thick silence that had settled around the newcomer. The 5 had formed a loose, wary semicircle. Viper slithered closer, her movements sinuous and silent. She didn't look at his hands or his feet, she looked into his eyes. She saw pain there, a deep, chronic ache, but also a startling gentleness. It was a disorienting combination. Crane hovered slightly, his neck craned. He noted the practical, worn quality of the stranger's clothes, the strange metal headband with a stylized leaf engraving, and the heavy bandage covering his right forearm. No ornamentation. Everything had a purpose. He moves like he's conserving everything, Crane murmured to Monkey. Even his attention. Monkey, trying to deflect the tension, bounced forward with a grin. So tall, orange, and silent. You climb all those stairs for the view, or did you hear about the legendary peach buns? He was met with a small, polite smile that touched Naruto's lips but died before it reached his eyes. It was an empty social gesture, a ghost of expression. Mantis, perched on Monkey's shoulder, leaned perilously forward, his antennae quivering. His heartbeat. Master Shifu, it's slow. Steady. Too steady. It's the heart rate of someone, resting in the eye of a storm. Shifu had heard enough. He stepped forward, his red robes whispering against the stone, his staff tapping a deliberate, authoritative rhythm. All movement ceased. Poe's chatter died. The five straightened. Shifu stopped before Naruto, his small frame nonetheless commanding the space. You bring the wind of another world with you, the old master said, his voice like grinding stones. It disrupts the stillness. It asks questions of our peace. Naruto turned fully to face him. He offered a bow, not the deep, formal bow of a student, but a shallow, respectful dip of the head from one leader to another. It acknowledged authority without submitting to it. I apologize, master. I have no control over my presence here. I am as much a disturbance to myself as I am to your stillness. What are you called? Naruto Uzumaki. And what is a Naruto Uzumaki in this world? A warrior? A spirit? A mistake? The question was a lance, meant to pierce pride, to provoke a revealing flare of emotion, anger, indignation, shame. Shifu needed to see what lay beneath the calm. Naruto absorbed the blow without a flinch. He simply nodded, accepting the barb as a possible truth. Maybe all three. Where I come from, I was a protector. A leader. Here. I am just a man who is lost. This valley, Shifu said, his voice rising to encompass the entire courtyard, operates on destiny. On the preordained will of the universe. The dragon warrior has been chosen. He gestured to Pa, who flinched slightly, a flicker of doubt crossing his broad face. The scroll chose him. Uguay foresaw him. There is no room for unchosen variables. Your existence here is a question the universe did not ask. A note outside the melody. The air grew taut. The five, instinctively, tightened their circle. It wasn't an aggressive move, but a protective one, a consolidation of their known world against this unknown element. Naruto's gaze traveled slowly from Shifu's stern, where he faced to Poe's conflicted one, then to each member of the five, Tigress's analytical intensity, Viper's empathetic concern, Crane's strategic scrutiny, Monkey's masked worry, Mantis's profound observation. He saw a family, a unit, a destiny fulfilled and in progress. He was an asterisk in their sacred text. He looked back at Shifu, and when he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper, yet it carried to every ear, clear and heavy as stone. I don't believe in destiny. The statement hung in the air, blasphemous in its simplicity. I have seen fate written in stone and blood, Naruto continued, his eyes growing distant, seeing other mountains, other villages. I have watched men choke on prophecies. Where I come from, destiny is a chain, and we spend our lives learning to break it. He looked up again, his gaze direct and utterly without malice. I'm not here to be chosen. I don't want your scroll or your title. I'm just here. And right now, here is all I have. With that, he turned. He didn't walk toward the palace buildings, didn't try to force entry or inclusion. He walked to the very edge of the courtyard, where the flagstones gave way to the mountain's edge and a single, ancient, gnarled peach tree stood, its branches stretching over the precipice. He sat down beneath it, his back against the weathered trunk, and looked out over the vast, peaceful valley spread below like a luminous quilt. It was a silent, powerful declaration. I will not force my way into your story. But I will not run from the place where mine has stalled. Shifu watched him, the roots of his whiskers trembling with deep, unsettled feeling. The panda, the dragon, the tiger, the crane, the viper, the monkey, the mantis, they were all pieces moving across the board Uguay had laid. Their moves, their conflicts, their growth, were part of the game. This, Naruto, was a piece from a wholly different game, one of shadow and blood and shattered fate dropped onto the cloth. His mere presence on the board changed the nature of the play. Pa shuffled to Shifu's side, his usual boisterous energy condensed into a small, worried voice. Master, he feels heavy. Not like a boulder. Like the whole mountain is sitting behind his eyes. Shifu placed a paw on his student's shoulder, a rare gesture of contact. He carries worlds on his back, Pa, the master murmured, his aged eyes never leaving the figure under the tree. Worlds that were not meant to touch ours. I do not know if his weight will anchor us or crush us. I do not know if he is a gift from Uguay, or a test we are not prepared for. As the sun began its descent, bathing the Valley of Peace in a painter's palette of amber, rose, and violet, Naruto sat unmoving. The residents of the palace went about their evening routines, training, cooking, meditating, but the atmosphere was charged. Glances were stolen toward the peach tree. Whispers were exchanged. Inside, in the quiet space where a beast and a man had learned to coexist, Kurama's voice was a gravelly whisper, resonant with the ancient, predatory understanding. They fear what they cannot categorize, Kit. Their balance is a delicate house of cards, built on the idea that everything has a pre-written place. We are a wildfire in a world that only believes in candles. We are the memory of a war their universe never had. Naruto watched the first, boldest stars prick through the darkening lavender sky. The stillness of this world was beginning to seep into him, a balm on the constant, low-grade ache of his own history. Maybe, he thought back, the mental voice tired but clear. But even wildfires burn out. And what grows back from the ashes, sometimes it's stronger. Sometimes it's just different. He closed his eyes, not to sleep, but to listen. To listen to the strange, rhythmless heartbeat of a world that believed in chosen ones, while an unchosen one, a man who had defied every prophecy thrown at him, rested for a moment beneath its sacred tree. The Valley of Peace had its dragon warrior. Its destiny was fulfilled. But now, it also had Naruto Uzumaki. And his presence alone was a quiet, unanswerable question, waiting in the twilight for the dawn that would inevitably come. Chapter 1 End. Word count, 3247. Next. Chapter 2, The Language of Scars. The peach tree became Naruto's anchor. For 3 days and nights, he did not leave its shade. He did not ask for food, though a simple bowl of rice and a jug of water appeared beside him each dawn, delivered by unseen hands. He did not seek conversation. He sat in a state of deep, watchful stillness that was neither meditation nor sleep. He was a shinobi acclimating to a new theater of operations, and his first mission was to understand the rules of this world. The Valley of Peace watched him back. At first, it was a spectacle. Villagers would make excuses to climb the stairs just to glimpse the silent spirit under the tree. But the novelty wore thin, replaced by a low-grade, pervasive curiosity. He wasn't doing anything. That was the strange part. He just was. The Furious Five, by unspoken agreement, took turns observing him from a distance, their training sessions often shifting to the courtyard quadrant nearest his perch. Crane was first. He practiced his aerial maneuvers, his keen eyes analyzing Naruto's posture. "He's not guarding," Crane reported to the others that evening. "There's no defensive tension. But he's not relaxed either. It's like he's braced for a blow that isn't coming. A blow he's so used to, he can't remember how to unbrace." Monkey tried to engage him on the second day, bouncing over with a playful series of flips and landing in a comedic pose. "So, the strong, silent tree sitter. You planning to grow roots? I know a great gardener. Well, he's a goat, and he mostly eats the flowers, but his heart's in the right place." Naruto had turned his head, offered that same faint, polite ghost of a smile, and said, "Thank you." Nothing more. Monkey's humor, which usually disarmed tension, evaporated in the face of that calm, leaving Monkey feeling oddly hollow, as if his joke had been a pebble dropped into a bottomless well. On the third morning, it was Viper's turn. She didn't practice. She simply slithered to a sunny spot on the wall near the tree and coiled up, silent and still. Hours passed. She watched the subtle signs of life in him, the almost imperceptible rise and fall of his chest, the way his fingers would occasionally trace a seam on his pant leg, the distant focus in his eyes that saw not the beautiful valley, but something far beyond it. Finally, as the sun reached its zenith, Naruto spoke, his voice a quiet rumble that didn't startle her. "You're very patient." Viper didn't move. "It's easier to hear the truth when you stop talking." A slow, almost imperceptible nod. "Yeah." Another long silence. A butterfly, blue and silver, fluttered between them and landed on Naruto's knee. He didn't move, watching it with an expression of gentle, profound sadness. "You're in pain," Viper said softly. It wasn't an accusation or a question. It was a statement of fact, offered like a cup of water. Naruto's eyes flicked to her. The sadness was still there, but now layered with a weariness that went to the bone. "Aren't we all?" "Not like that. Your pain isn't in your body. It's around you. Like a cloak." She uncoiled slightly, her head tilting. "You carry it so quietly. Most people, when they hurt, they scream or they hide. You just wear it." He looked back at the butterfly, which flexed its wings and took flight. "Screaming never made it lighter. Hiding never made it go away. So you learned to carry it without letting it define your steps." Viper was silent for a long moment. She, of all the five, understood the language of quiet suffering, of burdens carried with grace. Does it have a name? Your pain? He let out a breath, a slow sigh that seemed to carry ages with it. Many names. Some I loved. Some I hated. All of them are gone now. He finally looked at her fully, and his eyes were not those of a warrior in that moment, but of a survivor. The weight isn't the memory of the pain. It's the memory of the people you couldn't save from it. Viper felt a chill that had nothing to do with the breeze. She had no words. No kung fu philosophy covered this. She gave a small, understanding dip of her head and slithered away, leaving him with the truth now shared between them, hanging in the air like incense. Poe's struggle was less articulate, more visceral. Naruto's presence was a splinter in the happy narrative of his life. He wasn't a threat to Poe's position. Shifu had made it clear the panda was still the dragon warrior, but he was a threat to Poe's understanding of that position. Pa had been chosen, yes. But it had been a surprise, a comedy of errors that led to a miracle. He'd had to work, to train, to believe. But the core tenet of his world remained: Uguay had chosen him. Destiny had a plan. Naruto looked at the very concept of destiny like it was a shackle. Pa found himself staring at the stranger during meals, during meditation, during his own often clumsy training. He tried to muster his usual enthusiasm, but it would falter. One afternoon, as Pa practiced the wuxi finger hold on a training dummy, and mostly just poked it repeatedly, he saw Naruto watching from the tree. Not judging, not amused. Just observing. Frustration bubbled over. Pa waddled over, his breath coming in puffs. Okay, Pa said, hands on his hips. What's your deal? You just sit there. You don't train. You don't talk. You just look. What are you looking for? Naruto considered the question. Patterns. Patterns? Like cloud shapes? Because I saw one that looked like a dumpling eating a smaller dumpling yesterday. It was awesome. Behavioral patterns. Defensive gaps. Social hierarchies. Sources of water, food, potential conflict. Naruto's voice was matter-of-fact. Your valley has no perimeter watch. Your palace gates are unguarded. Your people have no evacuation plan. You rely entirely on the concept of balance and the skill of a few to protect the many. Pa blinked, thrown. Well, yeah? Because it works. We have kung fu. And destiny. And peach trees. Kung fu can be countered. Destiny can be misinterpreted. Naruto's gaze was steady. Trees can be burned. The simple, bleak truth of it left Pa cold. So you're just waiting for something bad to happen? I'm understanding what happens when something bad does. Naruto corrected gently. I'm not from a place of balance, Pa. I'm from a place of breaks and repairs. I see the cracks before I see the wall. Pa deflated, his bravado leaking away. He sat down heavily on the flagstones a few feet from Naruto. You think we're naive? I think you're fortunate, Naruto said. And I hope you get to stay that way. The two sat in silence, one a symbol of chosen joy, the other a monument to hard-won sorrow. Pa, for the first time, felt the immense, lonely weight of being a protector not as an exciting destiny, but as a terrifying responsibility. Naruto made it look so heavy. How? Pa started, then stopped. How do you carry it? The looking for cracks? Naruto was quiet for so long Pa thought he wouldn't answer. Then, you don't get a choice. The day you realize you're the one who has to stand between the crack and everything you love, the weight just appears. And you pick it up. Because the alternative is unthinkable. He said it with no heroism, no pride. It was a tradesman describing his tool. Pa left that conversation not feeling better, but feeling older. The fracture happened on the fourth day. It did not come from a place of malice, but from a place of deeply ingrained instinct. Shifu had ordered an advanced training session for the five and Pa, a complex, multi-partner exercise involving blindfolded defense against projectile peaches launched from multiple hidden catapults. It was chaos. Peaches whizzed through the air. Pa was yelping, dodging one only to slip on another's mush. Tigress and Crane moved in synced, elegant whirlwinds. Viper weaved through the barrage. Monkey and Mantis were a blur of collaborative deflection. A misfire. A catapult arm, stressed by Monkey's earlier mislanding, snapped with a loud crack. Instead of a peach, a heavy, jagged piece of carved wood, the catapult's counterweight, was hurled, not into the training courtyard, but in a high, spinning arc over the palace wall, directly toward the busy market street below. Shifu saw it. Crane! He barked. But Crane was occupied, swatting two peaches from Viper's blind spot. It was a trajectory. In a second, it would smash through the roof of the noodle shop where families were eating lunch. Naruto moved. There was no grand leap, no key-powered flash. One moment he was under the tree. The next, he was simply gone. He moved in a straight, devastatingly efficient line that seemed to bend the light around him, a shunshin no jutsu, dampened by this world's physics, but still faster than anything the valley had ever seen. He didn't run down the stairs. He went over the outer wall, a blur of orange against the sky. He intercepted the projectile not by catching it, but by redirecting it. A single, precise kick, the chakra-enhanced strength in his leg flaring for a microsecond, altered its spin and sent it harmlessly into the deep river with a tremendous splash. He landed silently on the roof of the noodle shop, then dropped to the street. The villagers stared, noodles dangling from their mouths. They had seen the shadow of the debris, seen the blur, seen the splash. Now they saw the stranger, standing calmly in their midst, checking to ensure no one was hurt. Back in the courtyard, the training had frozen. The five and Pa rushed to the wall, looking down. Shifu was already striding toward the stairs, his face a mask of stern disapproval. By the time they reached the street, a small crowd had gathered around Naruto. An elderly goose was patting his arm, thanking him profusely. A child pig offered him a steamed bun. Shifu pushed through, his staff thumping. The crowd fell silent. "What?" Shifu's voice was dangerously quiet. "Do you think you are doing?" Naruto turned. There was debris. It was heading for a populated area. I neutralized the threat. You used an unnatural speed. A violence of movement that does not belong here. Shifu stepped closer, his anger not hot, but cold and sharp. You interfered. A ripple of confusion went through the villagers. He had saved them. Why was Master Shifu angry? Naruto's calm finally showed a hairline crack, a flicker of something hard in his eyes. Interfered? It was an accident. I prevented casualties. You prevented nothing. Shifu's voice rose. You introduced a foreign element, your own unchecked power, into a balanced equation. Crane would have caught it. The wind might have shifted it. 100 variables existed that you did not account for. You saw a problem and you forced a solution, like a hammer smashing a delicate lock. The metaphor struck Naruto deeply. He had spent his life being the hammer. He had saved his world by being the ultimate, undeniable force. To be told that force itself was the transgression, it was a fundamental clash of ideologies. So I should have watched? Naruto's voice dropped, becoming dangerously soft. Calculated the variables while wood and stone rained down on children? You should have trusted. Shifu shot back. Trusted in the flow. In the destiny of this valley. You are a disruption, Naruto Uzumaki. Your very instincts are a disruption. You do not seek harmony, you seek control. The words hung in the air, cruel and true in their own way. Naruto looked from Shifu's furious face to the confused faces of the villagers, to the uneasy expressions of the five. Pa looked utterly torn. He saw it then. He was not a protector here. He was a contaminant. His reflexes, his hard-won instincts to act, to save, were seen as arrogance. A refusal to submit to the world's natural order. He gave a single, slow nod. Not of acceptance, but of understanding the gulf between them. Without another word, he turned and walked away. Not back up to the palace, but down the street, toward the bridge that led out of the valley. Where are you going? Tigress's voice cut through the tension. It wasn't a challenge. It was, for the first time, a genuine question. Naruto didn't look back. Away from the cracks. He walked until the village was behind him, until the peaceful sounds of the valley faded, and he found himself on a lonely mountain pass shrouded in mist. He sat on a rock, the profound silence of the wilderness closing in. They have a point, Kit, Kurama grumbled, though his tone lacked conviction. We are a bomb in a porcelain shop. I know, Naruto thought, head in his hands. But what am I supposed to do? Unlearn my own bones? Forget how to bleed so their peace isn't disturbed? Perhaps, Kurama mused, his ancient mind turning over the problem, the balance they speak of is not passive. Perhaps it is not about refusing to act, but about understanding the right action. Their old turtle. Ugwe. He chose the panda. That was an action. A radical one. Naruto sighed. He was so tired of being a radical element. He didn't hear the soft approach until she was a few feet away. He looked up. It was not Shifu, nor Pa. It was Tigress. She stood, her arms crossed, but the posture was less defensive and more uncertain. You left, she said. I was asked to. No. You were criticized. There is a difference. She hesitated, a monumental thing for her. Shifu, he fears what he does not understand. Your power has no precedent. It has no place in our legends. That makes it dangerous to him. It's just energy, Naruto said wearily. Directed will. Same as your kung fu. Is it? She took a step closer. When you moved, it was not just speed. The air itself winced. I felt it. It was not harmonious. It was coercive. You didn't blend with the world to move through it. You made the world get out of your way. He had no rebuttal. She was right. That was what chakra, at its highest levels, did. It imposed the user's will on reality. Why did you come after me? He asked. Tigris looked out at the mist-shrouded peaks. Because I also understand carrying a weight that others fear. The weight of being too much. Too strong, too focused, too intense for a peaceful world. She met his eyes. You asked for a place to breathe. It seems we have not offered you one. That is a failure of our hospitality, if not our philosophy. It was the closest thing to an apology he would get, and it meant more coming from her than any platitude from Pa. I don't want to break your world, Tigris, he said softly. I believe you. She uncrossed her arms. But you must understand, here, a hero is not the one who stops the disaster. A hero is the one who ensures the disaster never needs to be stopped. You are a symptom of a world where disasters are constant. We strive to be the cause of a world where they are not. It was a subtle, profound difference. One Naruto war-torn soul struggled to grasp. Come back, Tigris said, not as an order, but as an invitation. Not to the palace. There is a place in the valley. An old dojo unused. It is quiet. You can look for your patterns there. Without being under our eyes. It was a compromise. A place on the margin. It was where Naruto had always lived anyway. He stood. He looked at this fierce, disciplined warrior who had, in her own way, reached across the gap. He nodded. Together they walked back through the mist, not toward the shining palace on the hill, but toward the humble, shadowed edges of the world it protected. The dragon warrior's path was one of light and destiny. Naruto's path, it seemed, would be walked in the quiet spaces in between. Chapter 2 End. Word count, 3118. Next. Chapter 3, The Weight of Ghosts. The old dojo was a place of dust and echoes. It stood at the northern edge of the valley, nestled against the foothills where the bamboo forests grew thick. Its wooden frame was weathered to a soft gray, its paper screens torn and patched with clumsy, decades-old repairs. It smelled of damp wood, old straw, and forgotten effort. Tigris left him at the broken gate with a single nod. No words. She had given him a space, what he did with it was his own. Naruto stood for a long moment, taking it in. It was not a place of power. It held no secret techniques, no ancestral weapons. It was simply a shelter that had outlived its purpose. It was perfect. He spent the first day not cleaning, but listening. He sat in the center of the dusty main room, cross-legged, and opened his senses. He listened to the creak of the old timber settling, the skitter of small creatures in the rafters, the distant, muffled sounds of the village. He felt the flow of the strange energy here, the chi, as it moved around the structure like water around a stone. The dojo was an eddy in the valley's current, a place of stillness. On the second day, he worked. Not with chakra or flashy jutsu, but with the patient, methodical labor of a man who had rebuilt a village from ashes. He patched the worst of the roof with cured bamboo and river clay. He swept out years of accumulated debris. He mended the torn screens with careful, precise stitching, a skill learned from a long lifetime of mending his own gear and his own body. He did not make it new. He made it stable. He allowed its age to remain, its scars to show, but he ensured it would not fall down around him. Word spread, of course. The silent spirit was now the solitary handyman. Villagers would pass by on the path, peering in with a mixture of curiosity and lingering unease. They saw him working in silence, his movements economical, his expression one of focused calm. There was no threat in it. Just work. It was Mantis who visited first, officially. He arrived at dawn on the third day, carrying a small basket of steamed buns and a pot of tea. Housewarming gift! The tiny insect chirped, setting them down on the newly repaired porch. Also, you look like you could use some calories. Your energy signature is dense. Like a collapsed star. Very inefficient for basic metabolism. Naruto, who was sanding smooth a rough spot on a floorboard, paused and gave a genuine, if small, smile. Thank you, Mantis. He sat back on his heels and accepted a bun. It was warm and fluffy. Mantis hopped up onto the porch railing, his antennae twitching. You're not using your power. At all. Since you got here. Why? It disrupts the balance here, Naruto said, taking a bite. Pfft, balance. Mantis waved a forelimb dismissively. Balance isn't a stagnant pond, kid. It's a tightrope. You think Shifu or Tigris aren't disrupting molecules with every move? The difference is their disruption is predictable to the universe here. Yours is a foreign syntax. The grammar is all wrong. He tilted his head. You're trying to learn the grammar, aren't you? By not speaking at all. Naruto chewed slowly, considering the tiny, perceptive creature. Something like that. My energy, it's born of conflict. Of a world where life force is also a weapon. It feels aggressive here. Like bringing a sword to a tea ceremony. Interesting metaphor. Mantis buzzed. But maybe you're holding the sword wrong. Maybe it's not a sword. Maybe it's just a really, really focused tea strainer. Despite himself, Naruto let out a soft huff of amusement. You sound like an old friend of mine. He saw the world differently too. The best ones do. Mantis grew quiet for a moment. You know, I can hear them. Your ghosts. Not with my ears. With my sense of life force. You're surrounded by a crowd of silent echoes. Must be loud in there. He tapped his own head. The observation was so stark, so accurate, that Naruto's breath hitched. The smile vanished. He looked down at his hands, calloused and scarred. Yeah, he whispered. It can be. Mantis didn't offer pity. He offered companionship in the truth. We all have them. Shifu has his. Tigress has hers. Pose are just noisier and smell like noodle soup. He hopped down. The dojo is good. It holds silence well. But silence isn't the same as peace. Don't confuse the two. With that, the tiny master zipped away, leaving Naruto with the buns, the tea, and the weight of being so clearly seen. The visits became a pattern, though never a schedule. The members of the five came not as a unit, but as individuals, drawn by different currents. Crane came next, alighting gracefully on the dojo's newly stable roof. I've been analyzing the trajectory of that counterweight, he said without preamble, his strategic mind unable to let the puzzle go. My calculations suggest a 67% chance I would have intercepted it in time. A 22% chance it would have clipped the noodle shop sign. An 11% chance of collateral damage. He looked down at Naruto, who was weeding the small, overgrown garden plot behind the dojo. Your method had a 100% success rate. But a 100% chance of alarming Master Shifu. The risk-reward ratio is debatable. Naruto stood, wiping soil from his hands. You can't calculate everything, Crane. I know, Crane admitted, preening a wing feather. That's what frightens me. And you operate outside the calculable. You're a variable that resists quantification. That makes you strategically invaluable and socially complicated. I'm not a weapon to be placed on a board, Naruto said, his voice gentle but firm. Aren't you? Crane countered. Isn't that what a protector is? The right piece in the right place? The problem is, we don't know what game we're playing with you here. Are you a rook? A knight? Or are you a whole new rulebook? He left Naruto with that question, the strategic implications hanging like fog over the quiet dojo. Monkey's visit was less cerebral. He swung in from the bamboo forest, a whirl of acrobatic energy that seemed to vibrate the very air. He performed a series of impossible flips and landed in a handstand on the porch rail. So, the hermit life. Very mysterious, very broody. I dig it. He flipped down. But you gotta accessorize. Needs a gong. Or a really grumpy pet frog. I can get you a frog. He's not grumpy, but I can teach him to scowl. Naruto, who was sharpening a simple woodcutting tool with a stone, merely shook his head, a faint, real smile touching his eyes. Monkey's energy was a familiar chaos, reminding him of Konohamaru, of his own younger, noisier self. Monkey's chatter slowed as he watched Naruto's hands. The motion was rhythmic, hypnotic. There was a deep, unwavering focus to it that had nothing to do with the task and everything to do with the mind controlling it. You know, Monkey said, uncharacteristically quiet. You hide it really well. The storm inside. But it's in the little things. The way you hold a tool like it's a weapon. The way you scan a room before you enter it, not after. You're always ready. Doesn't that get exhausting? Naruto stopped sharpening. He looked at the tool, then at his own hands. It's more exhausting to be unprepared when the moment comes. The readiness, it becomes part of you. Like a heartbeat. Monkey nodded, his usual levity gone. I use jokes. You use silence. Same armor, different metal. He patted Naruto's shoulder, a brief, comradely touch. The armor gets heavy. Sometimes you gotta let someone else carry it for a minute. Even if it's just a monkey who tells bad jokes. With a somersault and a whoop, he was gone, leaving behind a lighter silence than the one he found. It was Viper who brought the first true test. She arrived one evening as Naruto was lighting a small, careful fire in the pit outside the dojo. She carried a bundle of herbs. For the tea, she said softly. They promote calm. Help with dreams. He accepted them with a nod of thanks. They sat by the fire as twilight deepened. She didn't speak, and he was content with the silence. It was a comfortable one, woven from shared understanding. The scream shattered it. It came from the bamboo forest, a high, terrified shriek of a child, followed by panicked adult shouts. Naruto was on his feet before the echo died, his body a coiled spring. Viper hissed, rising up. Bandits? Naruto's voice was a razor. No, not here. Perhaps a trapped animal. A fall. They moved together, Viper slithering swiftly, Naruto matching her pace with ground-eating strides that were just shy of supernatural. They found the source in a small clearing. A young rabbit kid had been gathering bamboo shoots, and the ground had given way, dropping him into a narrow, deep sinkhole. His mother was at the edge, weeping, trying to reach him, but the hole was too deep and its sides were crumbling. My boy! Someone help! Viper immediately coiled her body, preparing to lower herself in. I can reach him! But Naruto saw what she didn't. The soil around the hole was unstable, vibrating with each of the mother's frantic movements. A larger collapse was imminent. If Viper went down, she could be buried. Wait! Naruto said, his voice a command that brooked no argument. He dropped to his knees at the edge, ignoring the mother's cries. He looked down. The kid was maybe 10 feet down, terrified, clutching his leg. Direct action is coercion, Shifu's voice echoed in his mind. You force the world to your will. But a child was crying in the dark. Naruto closed his eyes for a split second. He couldn't use chakra to blast or to flash step. But chakra was, at its root, life energy. And this world's chi was life energy. Different dialects, perhaps, of the same language. He didn't reach for Kurama's torrent. He reached for his own, the deep well of Uzumaki vitality, and he asked, rather than demanded. He pushed a gentle, diffuse wave of it into the earth, not to shatter it, but to ask it to cohere. To hold. To be stable. The soil's vibration ceased. The crumbling edges firmed, as if suddenly bound by invisible roots. Viper felt it. She felt the aggressive, foreign energy soften, morph, into something that hummed in harmony with the land. It was a whisper, not a shout. No, Naruto said, opening his eyes, which glowed with a soft, blue-green light for an instant before fading. Viper didn't hesitate. She lowered her body into the hole, wrapped her tail gently around the kid, and lifted him out, handing him to his sobbing mother. The family clung together. Naruto sat back, a sheen of sweat on his brow. The effort of such precise, gentle application was immense, like performing brain surgery with a sledgehammer refined to a scalpel's edge. The mother turned to him, tears of gratitude in her eyes. Thank you. Thank you, sir. You saved him. Naruto shook his head, looking at Viper. We did. As they walked back to the dojo in the dark, Viper was silent for a long time. Finally, she spoke. You changed the nature of your energy. You spoke to the earth. You didn't command it. I tried, he said, voice tired. It's difficult. My first instinct is always to fight. To overcome. But you didn't, she said. You chose a harder path. A more harmonious one. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the rising moon. That is not the act of a disruption, Naruto. That is the act of a healer. The word struck him. Healer. He had been called a savior, a hero, a Hokage. Never a healer. The weight of it was different. Lighter, and somehow more profound. The final visit of this phase came not from the five, but from the heart of the palace itself. Pa found him 2 days later. The panda looked less conflicted, more resolved. He carried a large pot of his father's secret ingredient soup. Truce offering, Pa said, setting it down. And also, I'm starving, and you look like you could use a meal that doesn't come from a leaf. They ate in silence on the porch. The soup was delicious, rich, and comforting. Pa finally put his bowl down. I've been thinking, he said, about what you said. About carrying the weight because the alternative is unthinkable. He took a deep breath. I've been so busy being the dragon warrior, I never really thought about what happens if the dragon warrior isn't enough. If the destiny runs out. You don't have that luxury. You have to be enough, destiny or not. Naruto looked at him. You are enough, Pa. The scroll chose you for a reason. But what if the reason isn't enough one day? Po's voice was small, vulnerable. What if I need to be more than what was chosen? What if I need to choose myself? It was the core of Naruto's philosophy, voiced by the person who represented its opposite. Then you will, Naruto said simply. Because you'll have to. And you will. I've seen you. You don't just have the destiny of a dragon warrior, You have the heart of one. That matters more. Poe's eyes grew suspiciously shiny. He sniffed. Okay, deep stuff. Too deep. Soup's getting cold. He slurped loudly, breaking the tension. But as he left, he turned. Hey, Naruto? Thanks. For not being what I expected. It's better this way. Alone again, Naruto looked out at the valley, now bathed in the silver light of a full moon. The dojo was no longer just a shelter. It had become a junction. A place where different paths, of strategy, of humor, of empathy, of destiny, crossed and found, if not agreement, then respect. He touched the old, scarred wood of the porch post. The ghosts were still there, the crowd of echoes Mantis had heard. But in this quiet space, their voices were no longer screams of war. They were murmurs of memory. And for the first time since he'd arrived, the silence around him didn't feel like exile. It felt like the beginning of a conversation. Chapter 3 End. Word count 3062. Next. Chapter 4 The Unwritten Scroll. The moon waxed and waned. The Valley of Peace cycled through its gentle rhythms. In the quiet margin of the old dojo, a different kind of rhythm was being established, one born not of destiny, but of quiet, persistent presence. Naruto's existence ceased to be a spectacle and became a fact of the landscape. Villagers began to nod to him as they passed on their way to the bamboo groves. Children, initially wary, now dared each other to race past his gate, stealing giggles and glances. He did not seek them out, but when a ball rolled into his garden, he would pick it up and toss it back with a gentle underhand. When an old tortoise struggled with a bundle of firewood on the path, Naruto would wordlessly take the larger share and carry it to its destination. He was not building bonds, he was performing stitches. Small, precise acts of repair that slowly mended the tear his arrival had caused. The Five's visits became less about observation and more about respite. They came when the pressures of being legends weighed heavily. Tigress appeared one afternoon, her stripes taut with a frustration so deep it vibrated the air. She didn't speak. She simply began practicing the most violent, aggressive form of tiger-style Naruto had seen, a whirlwind of slashes and kicks that tore the air and scarred the training posts he directed. He watched from the porch, sharpening a set of old farming tools he'd found. He said nothing. He simply watched her war, letting her fight it alone but not unseen. When she finally stopped, chest heaving, sweat matting her fur, the silence was full of her unspoken rage. She stood back to him, shoulders rigid. They expect perfection. She ground out, the words ripped from her. A symbol. Not a person. Every mistake is a flaw in the legacy. Every emotion is a weakness in the armor. Naruto set down his whetstone. The screech of metal on stone had been her accompaniment. Now, his voice was the only sound. The strongest armor I ever knew, he said quietly, was worn by a man who showed every crack. He let the world see his broken pieces. And because they could see them, they knew where to place their trust. Perfection is a wall. Scars are a map. Tigress turned slowly. She looked at him, really looked, perhaps for the first time seeing not just his own burden, but the philosophy that had forged him in its bearing. She gave a single, sharp nod, a soldier acknowledging a truth from a fellow veteran. She did not thank him. She stayed for a while longer, sitting on the steps, her breathing slowly sinking with the rustle of the bamboo. She left quieter than she came, the storm within having found a harbor, however temporary. Shifu, of course, was not blind to the subtle shifts. Reports reached him, of the rescued kit, of the mended fences, of the way his students returned from the northern dojo with a contemplative stillness that was different from their usual post-training exhaustion. It unsettled him. This was not the blatant disruption he had feared. It was a slow, quiet infiltration, a changing of the soil's pH. He decided to see for himself. He arrived at the dojo at midday, unannounced. He found Naruto not in meditation or labor, but engaged in a seemingly mundane task, repairing a child's wooden toy cart, its wheel cracked. The concentration on the man's face was that of a master calligrapher painting a final stroke. You have made yourself a caretaker of broken things, Shifu stated, his tone neutral. Naruto didn't startle. He finished applying a dab of glue, set the wheel in place, and looked up. It's a skill I've had practice with, Master Shifu. Humph. And what of the larger breaks? The breaks in order? In destiny? Do you propose to glue them back together as well? Naruto set the cart aside and wiped his hands. I propose that not all breaks need to be fixed back to their original shape. Sometimes a repair changes the object, makes it stronger in a new way. And who are you to decide what shape the world should take? Shifu's tail flicked. You, an unchosen wanderer? The old barb, but Naruto was no longer the raw newcomer. I'm not deciding anything, he said, his voice calm as deep water. I'm responding. to a child's fear, to a broken wheel, to a friend's anger. Is that not what your flow is? Responding appropriately to what is in front of you. The flow is predetermined. It is the current of a river. You do not respond to a river, you learn to swim its course. And if the river is about to flood a village? Naruto asked, his blue eyes holding Shifu's. Do you swim the course and let the water drown the innocent? Or do you build a levee? Is the levee not also part of the river's eventual landscape? A response to its nature? Shifu was silent, his whiskers trembling. The analogy was infuriatingly apparent. Uguay had built levees, choosing foreseeing threats. But Uguay's levees were part of the grand design. This man's levees were built from a foreign material. You speak of action, Shifu said finally. But your greatest action here has been inaction. You hide in this ruin. I'm not hiding, Naruto said, a flicker of something old and fierce in his eyes. I'm listening. To your world. To its song. It's a gentle song. My soul is used to screaming. I'm trying to learn the melody before I hum along. The honesty disarmed Shifu's anger, leaving only a profound weariness and a dawning, reluctant understanding. This was not a warrior refusing to submit. This was a warrior learning a new, alien art of peace. And he was doing it with the same terrifying dedication he would apply to any combat. Shifu turned to leave, then paused. The toy cart. For the rabbit child? Yes. The glue you used. It is weak. It will break again under stress. I know, Naruto said. But by then, he'll be older. He'll either fix it himself, or let it go. The temporary fix gives him time to learn which choice to make. Shifu left without another word. The lesson was not in the repair, but in its deliberate impermanence. It was a philosophy of teaching, not of controlling. It was, he realized with a start, very much like Uguay's. The true test of Naruto's integration came not from a philosophical debate, but from the valley's belly. A strange malaise fell upon the livestock in the lower pastures. A wasting sickness, not violent, but insidious. Animals grew listless, their chi dimming. Master Goose, the valley's physician, was baffled. It was no poison, no recognizable disease. It was as if the will to live was simply leaking away. Panic, quiet but pervasive, began to seep through the community. This was not a threat a kung fu master could punch. This was a shadow that no amount of destiny seemed to illuminate. Puff, feeling the weight of his helplessness, confided in Naruto during one of his now regular soup deliveries. It's like they're just giving up. Puff mumbled, uncharacteristically somber. But why? The pastures are green, the water is clean. It doesn't make sense. Naruto listened, a distant memory stirring. A long-forgotten mission from his genin days, in a land where a natural deposit of lethargy-inducing minerals had poisoned the water table. It wasn't malice, it was geology. Has anyone checked the water source? Naruto asked. Not just for poison, but for heaviness. A change in the earth? Puff blinked. The earth? You think the earth is sad? Not sad. Sick. Or out of balance. Naruto stood. Show me the main spring for the lower pastures. They went together, leading the way. The spring bubbled up in a picturesque rocky grotto. It looked pristine. But Naruto didn't look with his eyes. He knelt, placed a hand on the damp moss, and closed his eyes. He pushed his senses down, through the soil, a technique akin to seismic sensing but filtered through his attunement to life energy. He felt it. A deep, sluggish wrongness. A fracture in the bedrock far below, not new, but recently shifted by a minor, unnoticed tremor. It was leaking a faint, draining energy, not malicious, but inert. A spiritual leadenness seeping into the water. He opened his eyes. The spring is tainted. Not by poison, but by stillness. A dead stillness from deep below. It's draining the chi, the vitality, from anything that drinks it. Poe's eyes were wide. How do you fight stillness? You don't fight it, Naruto said, rising. You redirect it. Or you give the spring a new source. The solution was monumental, impossible. It would require rechanneling an entire subterranean water flow. The kind of task that would demand immense earth-shaping power, the very kind of coercive force Shifu had condemned. Naruto returned to the dojo, deep in thought. He could do it. With Kurama's chakra, he could likely fracture the bedrock and seal the leak. But the collateral damage, the violent imposition on the land, would be another transgression. Another hammer blow. That night, under a sky choked with clouds, he sat on the porch, wrestling with the problem. Viper found him there. You know the cause, she said, sensing his turmoil. Yes. And you know a solution. Yes. But the solution, it breaks the rules. It breaks the world. Naruto corrected softly. My way would be like performing surgery with a landslide. I might fix the leak, but I'd cripple the land around it. Viper coiled beside him. Then we find another way. A way of the valley. Is there one? There must be. Balance is not passive. It is dynamic. Perhaps, we do not attack the leak. We invite new water. Her words sparked an idea. Not a confrontation, but an invitation. A lure. The next morning, Naruto went to Crane. He explained the problem in tactical terms. A negative energy source was poisoning the wellspring. We need to introduce a countercurrent, Naruto said. A positive, vibrant energy flow to dilute and overwhelm the inert one. But it has to be gentle. It has to be an offer, not an attack. Crane's strategic mind lit up. A harmonic intervention. Like using a sound wave to cancel out a noise. But the energy required, it would need to be pure, focused life force. And sustained. They went to Mantis. You're a life force sensor, Naruto said. Where in the valley is the point of most concentrated, healthy chi? Mantis didn't hesitate. The peach tree of heavenly wisdom. At the palace. Its roots drink from the purest vein of dragon energy in the mountain. The peach tree of Uguay. The heart of the valley's destiny. The plan that formed was audacious, delicate, and required the unanimous, silent cooperation of the entire Furious Five. There would be no asking Shifu. This was a choice they would make, an action they would take as protectors, not as disciples. Here is how it unfolded. Tigress and Pa would go to the tree. Pa, as the dragon warrior, would commune with it, asking, not demanding, for its aid. Tigress would lend her unwavering focus, her steadfast chi, as an anchor. Monkey and Mantis, the fastest and most agile, would create a circuit. Using their own bodies as conduits, they would run a relay from the base of the heavenly tree to the poison spring, their combined life force creating a shimmering, temporary pathway in the air, a bridge of vitality. Crane, from the air, would coordinate, his keen eyes ensuring the flow remained constant and true. And Viper and Naruto would be at the spring itself. Viper, with her deep empathy for flow and current, would gently knit the incoming positive energy into the water. Naruto's role was the most critical and the most perilous. He would act as the transformer. His immense chakra reserves would be the battery, but he had to convert his aggressive, combat-born energy into a form pure and gentle enough to match the peach tree's essence, and then feed it into the circuit Monkey and Mantis created. It was a plan of harmony, of unity. It required absolute trust. And it was a direct defiance of the principle of non-interference. They did it at dawn. It was not a spectacle of flashing lights. To an outside observer, it would have looked strange but peaceful, Pa and Tigress in deep meditation under the tree. Monkey and Mantis a blur of motion between palace and grotto. Crane circling high above. Viper coiled by the water, humming a low, soothing tune. Naruto sat at the water's edge, his hands submerged, his body rigid with concentration, his eyes closed. Inside, he was at war. Kurama's chakra, a seething, red-orange volcano, roared to be let loose. Naruto wrestled it, not to suppress it, but to translate it. He thought not of battles, but of Konoha's rebirth after Pain's attack. He thought of the first cherry blossoms after a long winter. He thought of Irika's smile, of Hinata's unwavering faith, of Sasuke's quiet return. He filtered the volcanic power through the lens of love, of bonds of home. A soft, gold-green light began to emanate from his hands, suffusing the water. It traveled up the invisible circuit maintained by Monkey and Mantis, a river of gentle light flowing uphill. It reached the peach tree, and the ancient tree seemed to shiver. A cascade of peach blossoms, out of season, suddenly rained down around Pa and Tigress, their petals infused with a gentle light that flowed back down the circuit, mingling with Naruto's translated energy. At the spring, the water began to glow. The lethargic, draining energy was not destroyed, it was surrounded, embraced, and slowly neutralized by the overwhelming, benevolent force. It was harmony through compassion, not conquest. The process took hours. As the sun climbed, the livestock in the distant pastures slowly raised their heads. The listlessness lifted. The light in their eyes returned. Exhausted, the circuit broke. Monkey and Mantis collapsed, panting. Crane landed shakily. Pa and Tigress emerged from their trance, covered in luminous petals. Viper slumped, her song ended. Naruto pulled his hands from the water. They were trembling. He had never used his chakra in such a way. It felt like he had just performed heart surgery on the world itself. He was empty, but it was a clean emptiness. They had done it. Together. Without Destiny's permission. The news reached Shifu swiftly. He came to the grotto, finding the 7 of them in various states of exhausted repose. He saw the fading gold-green light in the water. He saw the peach blossoms scattered around his students. He saw Naruto, looking more drained than he'd ever seen him, but with a peace on his face that had been absent before. Shifu said nothing. He looked from the healed spring to the faces of his students, united, purposeful, changed, and finally to the unchosen man at the center of it all. He had not just repaired a leak. He had written a new technique into the Valley's Book of Miracles. One not of individual destiny, but of collective choice. Of 7 different strengths woven into a single, healing thread. Shifu turned and walked away. He did not go to the palace. He went to Uguay's mural. He stared at the wise old turtle's likeness. You foresaw a panda, Shifu whispered to the painting. Did you also foresee a man who would teach him to see beyond the scroll? Was this your design, or his? The painted turtle offered only its eternal, enigmatic smile. The answer, Shifu realized, was no longer written. It was being written, in choices, in actions, in the quiet, healing light of a reformed energy. And for the first time, Shifu felt not fear at the unwritten scroll, but a tremulous, terrifying hope. Chapter 4 End. Word count 3254. Next. Chapter 5 The Fracture. The success at the spring should have been a triumph. It was, in the quietest sense. The livestock thrived. The valley's gentle hum of life returned to its normal pitch. But victories, Naruto had learned long ago, often plant the seeds of the next conflict. This one germinated in the space between gratitude and dogma. The villagers now looked at Naruto differently. The silent spirit was now the quiet healer. Respect replaced wariness. They brought small gifts to the dojo, baskets of fruit, hand-woven mats, jars of honey. He accepted them with the same quiet nod, but the attention was a weight. He was becoming part of their story, and he knew how dangerous that could be. The Furious Five were transformed. The shared endeavor had forged a new bond, one that ran deeper than their loyalty to Shifu or their duty to Pa. They had operated as a single organism, with Naruto as the unexpected, vital nerve center. A sense of invincible camaraderie bloomed, a feeling that together, they could solve any problem, destiny be damned. This was the fracture line. Shifu watched it all from his perch of authority, his old heart a nest of conflicted vipers. He saw the unity, the growth, the undeniable good that had been done. But he also saw the shift in authority. His students no longer looked only to the palace for guidance. They looked to the northern dojo. They looked to each other. And they looked to the man who had shown them a power born not of prophecy, but of profound, self-sacrificing will. The breaking point came during the seasonal festival of the blossoming peach, a celebration of Uguay's wisdom and the valley's enduring peace. It was a time of music, feasting, and demonstrations of kung fu prowess from the Five and Pa. The entire valley gathered in the palace courtyard. Naruto had been invited, not as a guest of honor, but as a resident. He stood at the back, near the outer wall, a shadow in his dark Hokage Haori over orange, his presence now familiar but still distinct. He watched Pa perform a surprisingly graceful demonstration of the Dragon Warrior's style, drawing cheers. He watched the Five execute a flawless, synchronized routine, a ballet of lethal beauty. Then, as the demonstrations wound down, Master Chow, the elderly sheep who was the valley's foremost historian, took the stage. His voice, reed thin but clear, carried over the crowd. And so we remember that our peace is not an accident, but a fruit of the great Uguay's foresight. A destiny written in the stars and fulfilled by the chosen among us. It was the standard homily. But this time, a young voice piped up from the crowd, the rabbit kid Naruto and Viper had saved. But what about Master Naruto? He saved me. And he fixed the sick water with the masters. Isn't that destiny too? A sudden, profound silence fell. Hundreds of eyes swiveled between the child, the stage, and the shadowed figure at the wall. Master Chow sputtered. Well, that is to say, acts of kindness are part of the valley's spirit, but the grand design, the Dragon Warrior. Pa, sensing discomfort, tried to laugh it off. Hey, yeah. Team effort. All in the family, right? More dumplings. But the seed was planted. The question hung in the air, poisonous and potent. If destiny chose Pa, what chose Naruto? Shifu, seated on the dais, felt the shift like a seismic tremor. The philosophy was being challenged not by argument, but by example. He stood, his small frame commanding the silence. The ways of the universe are profound. Shifu's voice cut through the air. Some are chosen by scrolls and signs. Others arrive. Their role is not to alter destiny, but to support it. To mend the edges. Let us not confuse kindness with cosmic purpose. It was a public delineation, a reaffirmation of the hierarchy. Naruto was placed firmly in the category of supporter, mender of edges. A useful, but ultimately auxiliary, component. Naruto felt the words. He understood the political necessity of them. But he also saw the flicker across the faces of the Five, a subtle wince from Viper, a tightening of Tigress's jaw, a disappointed sag in Crane's shoulders. They had been part of something that felt cosmic in its unity, and now it was being reduced to mending edges. He did not react. He simply bowed his head slightly, accepting the assigned place, and melted back into the shadows. His retreat was more damaging to Shifu's point than any protest would have been. It screamed of a strength that did not need to contest the title. The real damage, however, happened after the festival, in the privacy of the training hall. Shifu, seeking to reassert the primacy of the destined path, ordered a rigorous sparring session. He paired them off, but his instructions were clear. They were to use only the traditional forms, the pure kung fu that flowed from Uguay's teachings. The sparring was stiff, perfunctory. Monkey's moves lacked their usual chaotic joy. Crane overthought every counter. Viper's fluidity felt rehearsed. They were thinking, not flowing. Frustrated, Shifu barked. You fight like you have forgotten who you are. The harmony is gone. Where is the unity you displayed at the spring? It was Tigress who stopped, lowering her paws from her defensive stance opposite Crane. Her voice was low, but it echoed in the hall. Perhaps the unity came from a different source, Master. One that is not present in these forms. The air froze. Shifu's tail went rigid. Explain. Tigress, ever brave, stood her ground. At the spring, we were not thinking of individual styles or destined roles. We were thinking of the problem. We used what was needed. My steadfastness, Crane's strategy, Viper's empathy, Monkey and Mantis's speed, Poe's connection, and Naruto's ability to transform energy. It was a new form. A form born of necessity, not tradition. Necessity. Shifu spat the word. Necessity is the father of desperation, not wisdom. You would discard 1,000 years of balanced knowledge for the flash of a makeshift solution? It worked, Crane said quietly, stepping forward. It healed the valley without a single violent strike. Isn't that the highest form of kung fu? To overcome without conflict? It was an aberration. Shifu's voice rose, sharp with a fear he could not name. A confluence of unusual circumstances. You are the Furious Five. The Dragon Warrior. Your power comes from your mastery of the known path, not from improvising with foreign elements. The word foreign hung in the air, charged and ugly. Who had been uncharacteristically quiet, spoke up, his voice pained. Master, he's not foreign anymore. He's Naruto. He is a variable, Shifu roared, his composure shattering. A powerful, well-meaning variable, but a variable nonetheless. He exists outside the prophecy. His influence makes you doubt the path. Look at you. You question the very forms that made you legends. He was right in a way. Naruto's presence, his very different philosophy, that strength was a tool for protection, not a proof of destiny, had introduced doubt. It had shown them another way to be strong. A way that felt, to them, more earned, more conscious. You will cease these unsupervised collaborations, Shifu decreed, his tone leaving no room for appeal. Your training will focus solely on the sacred scrolls. You will not visit the northern dojo. Is that understood? The silence that followed was one of stunned, hurt rebellion. They did not nod. They did not bow. They just stared at their master, the man who had raised them, with a new and heartbreaking distance in their eyes. The fracture was no longer a line. It was a chasm, opened in the heart of their family. Naruto learned of the decree not from the five, but from the sudden, palpable absence. The familiar, rotating presence at his dojo ceased. The path remained empty. The silence returned, but now it was a silence of absence, not of peace. He understood immediately. He had seen this before, the isolation of a perceived corrupting influence. He was the Jinchuriki all over again, the village pariah, but this time for his ideas, not his monster. The irony was almost beautiful in its pain. He didn't rage. He didn't go to the palace to confront Shifu. He simply continued his quiet existence, the stitches of his daily life now feeling more like a suturing of his own isolation. It was Mantis who broke the embargo first, 2 days later. He didn't come to the dojo. He intercepted Naruto on one of his long, solitary walks through the high bamboo forests. He's scared, Mantis said bluntly, sipping from one stalk to another beside Naruto. Shifu. Terrified. It's not about you. It's about him. His whole life, his entire purpose, has been shepherding the Chosen One, upholding Uguay's legacy. You're proof that Uguay's way might not be the only way. That's an earthquake under his feet. I never claimed it was the only way, Naruto said, his voice tired. You don't have to. Your existence claims it for you. You're a living question mark, and he hates questions that don't have answers in the scrolls. Mantis landed on Naruto's shoulder, a tiny, weighty comfort. They miss you. All of them. Poe's cooking has gone salty with sadness. They have their path. Their destiny. I won't be the reason they lose it. Maybe destiny is a path with more than one lane, Mantis chirped philosophically. Anyway, I'm just a bug. What do I know? I'm off to violate more direct orders. Try to look less like a kicked puppy. It's undignified. The tiny master zipped away, leaving Naruto with the confirmation of the cost his presence was extracting. The cost became grievously personal the next night. A summer storm, rare and violent, rolled over the mountains. Lightning tore the sky. Rain fell in blinding, horizontal sheets. Naruto secured the dojo, watching the fury. Storms felt familiar, almost comforting in their chaos. Then, through the roar of wind and rain, he heard it, a deep, ominous groan of shifting earth, followed by a distant, muffled crash that was not thunder. It came from the direction of the village. His body moved before his mind processed. He was out the door, a blur cutting through the punishing rain. The source of the sound was the river. The torrential downpour had swollen it to a raging brown beast, and it had undercut a section of the bank near the village's main bridge. A large, ancient willow tree, a beloved landmark, had toppled. Not into the river, but across the main thoroughfare, its massive trunk and tangled branches crushing the front of the village archives, a building that, he knew, often housed the elderly historian, Master Chow, working late. Panic was already stirring as villagers braved the storm. They saw the destruction, the tree pinning the crushed building. They heard a faint, trapped cry from within. And the five arrived moments later, Shifu behind them. They assessed the scene with trained eyes. The tree was too massive, too waterlogged, too entangled in the rubble to move with pure strength. The structure underneath was unstable. A wrong move could bring the rest of the building down on whoever was inside. "We need to cut it away, piece by piece," Crane shouted over the storm. "There's no time," Viper cried, sensing the fading life force within. "The pressure, it's crushing him." Pushed against the trunk, his dragon warrior strength making it shudder but not budge. "I can't get leverage. It's too slippery." Shifu barked orders, his mind racing through traditional techniques, levers, coordinated lifts. But each plan required minutes they didn't have. Naruto watched from the edge of the crowd, the rain plastering his hair to his scalp, his orange cloth a beacon in the gloom. He saw the desperation on Poe's face, the helpless calculation in Crane's, the agony in Viper's. He saw Shifu, for the first time, look truly old and out of answers. The old sheep's cry came again, weaker. It was a simple equation. A life was ending. The balanced solutions were too slow. Naruto stepped forward. He didn't run. He walked through the crowd, which parted for him. He walked past Shifu, past the five. He walked up to the colossal, fallen tree. He placed a single hand on the wet, rough bark. He didn't try to lift it. He didn't try to cut it. He spoke to it. It was not the gentle persuasion of the spring. This was a directive, but not a violent one. It was the voice of a Hokage giving an order to the earth itself. He poured his chakra into the tree, not to shatter it, but to command its very cells to remember. To remember its years of reaching for the sun. To remember the stability of its vertical life. He asked it, with the full, respectful authority of one who had carried the weight of a world, to stand up. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the wood groaned. Not the groan of breaking, but of bending. Roots tore from the mud. Branks untangled from rubble with a sound like sighing. The massive trunk, impossibly, began to rise. It lifted itself off the crushed building, shedding water and debris, and settled back onto its remaining root structure, standing crookedly, impossibly, like a veteran leaning on a cane, but standing. The rain seemed to hush. The only sound was the river's roar. The way to the trapped historian was clear. Pa and Tigris surged forward, pulling the dazed but alive old sheep from the wreckage. No one cheered. They stared, stupefied, at the resurrected tree, then at the man who had done it. It was a miracle that looked like a defiance of nature itself. Shifu walked up to Naruto. The master's face was ashen, his robes soaked. He looked at the standing tree, then at Naruto's hand, still resting on the bark. The energy that had just been used was not harmonious. It was sovereign. It was the power of a king commanding his domain. "You see?" Shifu whispered, his voice raw with a profound, weary despair. "You cannot help it. You must command. You must dominate. Even to save a life, you break the world to do it. You make the tree forget it ever fell. That is not balance. That is tyranny of good intentions." Naruto met his eyes. He was exhausted, empty. He saw not anger in Shifu's face, but a shattered faith. He had just saved a life, and in doing so, had proven Shifu's deepest fear correct. He removed his hand from the tree. The willow remained standing, a monument to the impossible, a permanent question mark in the landscape. "I'm sorry," Naruto said, the words meaning more than an apology for the act. They were an apology for his nature, for the inescapable truth of what he was. He turned and walked away, not back to the dojo, but into the sheeting rain, toward the mountain path that led out of the Valley of Peace. The fracture was complete. He had healed the spring and saved a life, and all he had achieved was the proof that he did not, and could not, belong. This time, no one followed him. Chapter 5 End. Word count 3245. Next. Chapter 6 The Hollow Mountain. The rain was a shroud. It blurred the world into a watercolor of grays and greens, washing away color, definition, and hope. Naruto climbed, not with purpose, but with the mechanical momentum of a thing that has run out of reasons to stop. The path was slick mud under his boots, the bamboo hissed like 1,000 scornful whispers, and the ache in his chest had nothing to do with exertion. He had reached the tree line, where the disciplined forest gave way to ragged, storm-lashed rock, when he felt the first tremor. Not in the earth. In the air. A wrongness that made the rain itself seem to flinch. Kurama, silent and somber since the incident at the willow, let out a low growl. Kit. That is not the weather. Naruto stopped, turning back to look at the valley through the veils of rain. The village lights were smudged gold blossoms in the gloom. But above the Jade Palace, the clouds were churning in a way that defied the wind. They swirled inward, darkening to the color of a bruise, shot through with veins of sickly, pulsating ember light. The pressure in the air dropped, making his ears pop. It was not a natural storm. The energy felt familiar in its wrongness, a void, a hunger. It was the polar opposite of the valley's nourishing chi. It was consumptive. A cold that had nothing to do with the rain settled in his gut. He had left. He had walked away to spare them his disruptive presence. And in his wake, something had found a crack in the world he'd helped strain. Something drawn, perhaps, by the very echoes of his foreign power, or by the temporary fracture in the valley's unity. He stood frozen on the mountainside, a stark silhouette against the granite. The part of him that was Hokage, the protector, screamed to go back. The part of him that was the unchosen, the blamed, argued that his return would only make things worse. That he was the catalyst for this imbalance. A streak of lightning, not white but that same sick amber, lanced down and struck the highest tower of the Jade Palace. There was no explosive crash of thunder, only a deep, shuddering thrum that vibrated through the rock beneath his feet. A shockwave of that draining, inert energy, the same energy from the poisoned spring, but magnified 1,000-fold, rippled outwards. He saw the lights in the village below flicker and dim, not from power loss, but as if the very will to shine was being leached away. He made his choice. He turned and ran, not down, but across the sheer mountainside. He was a ghost in the storm, his chakra flaring just enough to grant him purchase on vertical rock, to propel him across impossible gaps. He was a shadow moving toward the epicenter, not to rejoin, but to observe. To understand the threat his presence may have summoned. He reached a high outcrop overlooking the palace courtyard. The scene below was one of eerie, silent struggle. The Furious Five and Po were arrayed in the rain, facing the source of the disruption. It was not a creature, not an army. It was a phenomenon. A swirling vortex of that amber darkness had manifested in the center of the courtyard, and from it extended tendrils of gloom that seemed to sap color, sound, and energy from everything they touched. Where they brushed the stone, it didn't crack, it simply became dull, lifeless, as if its history had been erased. A tendril lashed towards Crane, and he dodged, but the edge of his wing it grazed didn't tear, the feathers turned gray and brittle, falling away like ash. They were fighting entropy itself. To unleash the Wuxi finger hold. The blinding golden light shot forth, but when it struck the core of the vortex, it didn't dispel it. The amber darkness absorbed the light, swelling slightly, pulsing with a satisfied rhythm. Pa stumbled back, horrified. "It's eating kung fu!" Monkey yelled, his usual acrobatics slowed, his movements becoming leaden as the field of draining energy expanded. Tigress launched a devastating tiger blaze attack. The fiery chi from her strikes was siphoned away into the vortex before it could land, making the darkness glow briefly brighter. "Our energy fuels it!" she roared in frustration. They were trying to fight a fire with oxygen. Every technique, every ounce of their destined power, was only making the enemy stronger. It was a perfect counter to a world of proactive, expressive energy. It was the embodiment of the dead stillness, from the spring, given sentience and hunger. Shifu stood on the palace steps, his staff raised, his face a mask of despair. He was shouting orders, but his commands, based on a lifetime of combating tangible foes, were useless. This was a threat the scrolls had never mentioned. Naruto watched, his analytical shinobi mind cutting through the panic. This entity didn't just absorb energy, it absorbed purpose, will. It fed on action itself. The more you fought it, the stronger it became. The only way to win was to not fight. But not fighting meant being consumed. It was a paradox that perfectly mirrored his own situation in the valley. He saw Viper try a different tactic. Instead of attacking, she coiled defensively, radiating a calm, empathetic energy, an attempt to soothe, to harmonize. The amber tendril that approached her slowed, seemed to hesitate. For a moment, it wavered. Then, as if irritated by the lack of aggressive energy to consume, it lashed out more forcefully, and Viper was forced to dodge, her calm shattered. It doesn't just want energy, Kurama's voice growled in his mind. It wants the struggle. The conflict. It is a parasite on purpose itself. Your friend's destiny, their will to fight, it is a feast. Below, Po was on his knees not from injury, but from helplessness. The dragon warrior, the ultimate answer, was powerless. His destiny had no technique for this. The look on his face was one of utter cosmic betrayal. Shifu saw it too. The master's shoulders slumped. The foundation of his world, the infallibility of Uguay's chosen path, was crumbling before a horror the path had not anticipated. This was Naruto's fault. He knew it with cold certainty. His foreign chakra, his different frequency, had been like a bell ringing in the void, attracting this thing that fed on the dissonance between his world and this one. Or perhaps his very act of healing the spring had left a metaphysical scar, a weakness this entropy could exploit. He had to fix it. And fixing it, he knew with a soul-deep certainty, would require the ultimate violation of the valley's principles. It would require an act of such profound, self-annihilating dominance that it would confirm every fear Shifu had ever harbored. He would have to become a black hole to fight a vacuum. Naruto dropped from the outcrop, landing silently in a shadowed corner of the chaotic courtyard. He did not join the five. He did not call out. He walked, with slow, deliberate steps, directly toward the swirling amber vortex. Naruto! No! Tigress screamed, seeing him. Get back! It'll drain you! Crane shouted. Po just stared, a hope dawning in his eyes that was immediately followed by terror. Naruto ignored them. He stopped 10 feet from the pulsating core. He could feel it pulling at him, not just at his chakra, but at his memories, his resolve, his very will to exist. It whispered without words, offering the sweet relief of oblivion, of an end to the struggle. He understood its offer. It was the same offer the valley's peace had subtly made: stop fighting, stop striving, just be. But this was a perverse version, not peaceful being, but null being. He closed his eyes. Inside, he faced Kurama. You know what this means, Kit, the Ninetales rumbled, its voice uncharacteristically grave, without a trace of anger or condescension. I do. It will not be like the tree. That was a command. This will be a war of annihilation. You will have to become something this world was never meant to hold. You may not come back from it. I know. There was no more discussion. There was only the pact between them, forged in hatred, tempered in respect, and now to be consummated in sacrifice. Naruto opened his eyes. They were no longer blue. They were the crimson of the Sharingan, but slitted with the vertical pupils of the fox. Whisker marks darkened on his face. A cloak of furious, red chakra, spiked and seething, erupted from his body, not the gentle gold green of his healing, but the raw, apocalyptic power of the Ninetales chakra mode. The rain vaporized in a hissing cloud around him. The valley's energy recoiled. The very air screamed in protest at the presence of such unbridled, dimensional violence. Shifu fell back a step, his eyes wide with a horror beyond fear, the horror of seeing a god of war born in his garden. The amber vortex pulsed with eager, gluttonous delight. Here was a feast. A storm of conflict, of raging, untamed power. It lunged for him, tendrils of nothingness expanding to engulf the raging red light. Naruto did not dodge. He let them touch him. And he began to feed it. But he did not feed it his struggle. He fed it his emptiness. He reached into the core of his being, past the chakra, past the will, to the place only a Jinchuriki who had known absolute loneliness could access. The hollow mountain inside him. The void left by parents he never knew, the friends he had buried, the peace that always seemed to slip through his fingers, the love that was both his strength and his greatest vulnerability. He tapped into the profound, silent lack that existed beneath all his power. He channeled that void, that infinite hunger of the soul, through Kurama's chakra, and offered it to the amber entity. It was like giving fire to a creature made of dry tinder. The vortex consumed it greedily at first, swelling, the amber light blazing triumphantly. The five cried out in despair. But Naruto kept feeding it. He gave it the loneliness of 12 years of hatred. He gave it the hollow echo of a name called with scorn. He gave it the silent space where a father's advice should have been. He gave it the aching void of a world he could never return to. He gave it an ocean of emptiness to drink. The entity began to shudder. It was designed to consume purposeful energy, to thrive on conflict and will. This was not energy. This was the absence of energy. This was the vacuum at the heart of a star. It was gorging on a famine. The amber light flickered, staining, growing muddy. The swirling slowed, becoming erratic. It tried to pull away, to retract its tendrils, but Naruto's red chakra claws seized them, holding the connection fast, forcing the void into it. Stop! A thin, rasping voice seemed to emanate from the vortex, a parody of sound. Too much nothing. Naruto, his voice a dual-toned growl of man and beast, spoke for the first time. You wanted what I carry. Take it. Take all of it. He unleashed the final, ultimate void, the memory of holding a dying world on his shoulders, and the terrifying, hollow freedom of having finally set it down. The emptiness of peace after a lifetime of war. With a soundless, inward shriek that was felt rather than heard, the amber vortex collapsed. It didn't explode. It imploded. It sucked inward upon itself, the light winking out, leaving behind not even debris, just a perfectly spherical patch of courtyard stone that was smooth, sterile, and utterly, permanently dead, a scar of non-existence. The red chakra cloak vanished. Naruto dropped to his knees, then onto his hands. He was gaunt, pale, his breathing shallow. He looked drained not of chakra, but of self. His eyes were blue again, but they were windows into a vast, silent desert. The storm above broke, the unnatural clouds scattering. Rain fell again, clean and normal. Silence, heavier than any before, blanketed the courtyard. But was the first to move, rushing to Naruto's side. Naruto! What did you do? Naruto didn't look at him. He stared at the dead patch of stone. Shifu approached slowly, his steps echoing in the quiet. He looked from the scar on his world to the man who had made it. He saw not a triumphant warrior, but a hollowed-out vessel. He saw the cost. The ultimate, terrible cost. You! Shifu's voice broke. You fought nothing with nothing. Naruto finally lifted his head. His face was a landscape of exhaustion beyond physical limits. I gave it what it wanted, he whispered, until it choked. He tried to stand, his legs buckling. Pa caught him, holding him up. The five gathered around, their faces etched with awe, horror, and a dawning, gut-wrenching understanding. He had saved them. Not with the harmonious power of the valley, but with the apocalyptic emptiness of his own exiled soul. He had proven himself the ultimate disruption, the ultimate foreign element. He had become the void to defeat the void. And in doing so, he had shown them the true, terrible shape of a protector who has no destiny to lean on. A protector who must become the monster, must wield the very abyss, to keep the lights safe. Shifu met Naruto's empty eyes, and for the first time, there was no fear, no anger. There was only a shattered, profound, and boundless grief. He had been right about the power. And he had been wrong about everything else. The fracture was no longer between master and students, or between destiny and choice. It was now inside Naruto himself. And they all knew, looking at the hollow mountain he had become, that some voids, once opened, can never truly be filled again.